I'm Matt Landau from VRMB, and this is Unlocked, Season 9, Home Runners. Many of you know I'm a soccer fan, and this week the soccer world lost one of its great journalists. Grant Wahl was the most influential American soccer journalist, and his work aided the growth of soccer in our country as much as any one human, and I was one of his loyal followers. Grant was only 48 years old, and I've admired his style for years. He was courageous by always speaking truth to power, obsessive, as many of the world's great craftspeople are, and generous. He was extremely intentional about amplifying all voices in the soccer world, not just the famous ones. His life's work, which I think is a lot like our life's work, was deep down about people. And when you read these posts online from people around the world, there's this Anthony Bourdain-like sorrow about the big soccer life that Grant led. And I've always found that kind of annoying, by the way, how the best praise, the most heartfelt stories, they always come just after you die. This week's episode features Brian Olson, who I've known for many years and who had an incident this past year in Asheville that was life-threatening. Brian and I can chuckle about it now in hindsight, but the discussion goes far deeper than technology and operations and growth in our industry. It goes down to purpose and people and why we do what we do. This episode's brought to you by Point Central, the leaders in smart home automation, who Brian actually used to work for before he started his own property management company. And Breezeway, property care and operations platform where Brian's son, Chris, actually happens to work. So this episode, if anything, is truly keeping it in the family. Let's start with you kind of walking us through that day and up until the moment when you can't remember anything.
Hey, Matt. On Tuesday, it was September 27th. I was at the LiveRez Partner Conference in Asheville, North Carolina. Was having a pretty good day, feeling good. Was on a panel with you that day. Went really well, talking about our tech stacks and things like that. Went to the opening cocktail hour, had a beer and a couple things. Was supposed to go out to dinner that night with Explory, Jess, Barb, Sally, and I were going out to dinner. I started not feeling very well. I said to Barb and Sally, I said, why don't you guys go to dinner with Jess? I'm just going to go up and lay down in the room. And you guys bring me up something to eat, and I'm sure I'll be better by then. I was there. Things started not feeling real well. Last thing I remember is I sent a text message to Barb that said, hey, are you coming back to the room soon? And that was the last thing I remembered that evening.
Wow. And what did Barb recount from that moment on?
Barb remembers walking into the hotel room. She sent me a text message that said, hey, I'll be up in a minute. I'm bringing you some chicken wings for dinner. She got to the room and she couldn't see me. She figured I'd be laying in the bed. She couldn't find me. She walked around the side of the bed and I was passed out on the floor, up against the bed, wrapped around a nightstand. And that's how she found me unresponsive.
So, Brian, I forgot to ask you, what does the phrase home runners mean to you?
Home runners means people that are taking care of things and making sure you run a great operation. And it's that's what home runners means to me.
And listeners, we will most certainly be coming back to this life moment for Brian. Brian's someone I've known for many years, basically since the very first event that I ever attended. And this episode is going to be different from most of our interviews. We're not going to talk too much about vacation rentals, more about health and relationships and life, which is way beneath the surface of any of the normal podcast subject matter. So, Brian, when I first met you, well, let's start at the beginning of Beachcomber. What was kind of a day in the life of Brian like as you're beginning to build that business?
A day in the life of Brian was I was actually working for, I was actually a rep. I was the national sales rep for Point Central to LiveRez Partners. I would work during the day for Point Central, and on my lunch breaks and evenings and weekends, I would work with Beachcomber. We started with one property and one employee. We worked really hard. There were three of us. There's three of us that are business partners: Barb, Sally, and I. Barb's my wife. She worked the business full time. Sally was in college at 54. And so we spent a lot of weekends building. About 2.5 years into working for Point Central and our business going, Barb looked at me and said, "Here's the deal. You either have to come work in your company and leave Point Central, or we have to hire somebody for you to do that." By that time, 2.5 years, we've grown to about 22 properties. So it was time to come and start working in my own company. And so I did that in 2016.
And was that a hard decision?
No, it was a real easy decision. When Greg Burge hired me, he hired me knowing that I was going to only be with Point Central for 2.5 to 3.5 years. That the goal all along was to get the business built enough that it could support the three of us. And because those first few years, as we all know, starting businesses, you don't take a lot of salaries and things like that. So somebody's got to pay the bills. So making the transition from working in the corporate world to back working for myself was a great, great transition.
And in hindsight, do you look at that moment when you, let's just say, took your wife's advice and started focusing on your business full time? Was that an inflection point for Beachcomber?
It was. Uh, I always was a sort of face of Beachcomber. Barb and Sally aren't big on the public speaking or doing those things. They always wanted to push me out, which made it a little harder to do when I had a corporate job. It really gave me the ability to get involved in the community, get involved with my homeowners, and start to seriously grow the business.
And so, what year was that in?
That was in 2016.
Okay, so back in 2016. And at that point, the competitive landscape in Cannon Beach for vacation rentals was, I'm guessing, very different than it looks today. What was it like back then?
It was very different. There were three or four local companies that were locally owned. Vacasa was entering the market, but that was the only big player. Oregon Beach had a couple houses. So there wasn't, it was a pretty easy landscape to operate in. Our regulations make it a little tough. A lot of companies don't want to come in. And so we had that mastered. You didn't have a lot of the tech. It was starting to come in 2016. So everybody kind of operated on the same level playing field. And that's changed a lot in the last few years.
And you're someone who I think just epitomizes what it means to build a network and to do networking in our industry. It's always something, the first thing I mention to folks who are new, attend some of these events that have attendees who run businesses like you'd like to run somewhere down the line. And pretty sure that was where I first met you, at an event, Brian. In hindsight, I don't think you could view your business growth any other way without it, right?
No way. I think networking in this industry is the biggest key to success. I remember going to my very first event in Phoenix with VRMA, and we were in a session, and we got this quirky little thing to put on a refrigerator called Mr. Refrigerator. And the PM, the property manager that was speaking, said, "We put this on and save money because it saved us from getting refrigerator calls that the refrigerator wasn't working during turnover days." And we asked him if we could use it, and they said, "Absolutely, use it. It's why I'm here." And that little nugget from that conference probably saved us $10,000 that summer in service calls, because people read it and they didn't call us because the refrigerator wasn't working. That all happens because of networking. Um, I probably spend 2 to 3 hours a week on the phone with different PMs across the country, just talking and going through things. I actually have a call later today where there's 8 of us that get together once a month. We're from all over, and it all came out of a advisory group with LiveRez that we have continued afterwards. Some of us have moved to. I, I'm still where I am. There's others that have moved to different softwares, but the 8 of us get together religiously once a month to talk about what's going on, what the new trends are, and share. And it's a really great thing.
And I think part of one of your real gifts also is rational decision making. And by that, I mean non emotional decision making. And by that, I mean um, thoughtful decision making. And one of those sort of crossroads came when LiveRez was acquired. And I remember seeing you in, was it New Orleans?
Memphis and New Orleans.
That was the season in which LiveRez partners, LiveRez being a property management software that's been on the scene for quite some time, were going crazy and talking about leaving and talking about how their trust was gone and all these things. But then, of course, there was Brian who's like, I'm going to play it by ear and ride this out. And in the end, in hindsight, riding out that little moment of ownership change was, I think, a defining factor of your success.
It was, as you know, and I know, leaving a PMS for another one is an expensive venture. Um, it's not something to take lightly. There was a transition, and like anything, when there's a transition, things are rough. Um, I think that the former owner of LiveRez did a great job in building a product and developing a partnership attitude with LiveRez. Um, there were some people that were upset when the sale happened. We all transition. Things are going to happen. Um, and when Inhabit bought it, there was some rough patches. And there's new players on the block that always have the new shiny coin. Well, I kind of live by this motto: it's the devil you know versus the devil you don't. There's not a PMS software out there that I feel is perfect, or wouldn't be any other PMS softwares. So I felt a real loyalty to LiveRez. They had taken good care of us in our startup. When Tracy had it, I just felt we needed to stick around and see what happened. And I spent New Orleans and Memphis trying to talk people off cliffs not leaving to leave. Some people did. Um, and we're still here 6 years later.
As is a whole new generation of LiveRez partners, and we'll touch on that in a few minutes. Back to where we so um, dramatically opened this story. But I think it also is a theme of adapting to change that is hard for everyone, myself, yourself included. But doing so in the most proactive way possible, in the most controlled and intentional way possible. And I'd like to talk a bit about where you were at this stage in your life. Let's just start by saying you were a big guy, right?
I was at my heaviest, Matt. I was in at about 365 to 370 pounds, 362 on a good day.
And was that a result of what?
I like to eat, and I have a sweet tooth. And I was lazy. I admit, work was stressful. Building a company is not easy, and carrying two companies and raising kids, it's tough. So you're exhausted when you get home. So I'd get home, I'd fix dinner, I'd sit myself down in front of the TV or the computer. Um, I'd get up at 7 in the morning, 6, 7 in the morning, have breakfast, sit myself in the front of the TV or computer till I went to work, and that was kind of my life. You ran around all day, and I thought, well, that's good enough. As I slowly started to put on more pounds.
And a lot of people get into that routine and it pretty much becomes the rest of their lives. I'm curious, at what point did you start thinking about your health differently?
Well, I was diagnosed with diabetes back in 2016, 17. Um, and so I started watching what I was eating a little bit. I was on 4 or 5 different medications. My family has a history of a aortic heart valve situation. And I started noticing some of the effects of that, a heart murmur. So I had to get a cardiologist at about, I think I was 54. It's hereditary, so there's no fighting it. I'm gonna have to have a replacement at some point. And in 2021, my daughter, who who's a big part of my life, decided to have gastric sleeve surgery. Um, and at this point, she's down a little over 200 pounds, and she was a bit of an inspiration to me. And last spring in May, I had had my cardiology appointment, had my echo, my valve had gone from a moderate case to a moderate severe. I still was able to function, but it was like, this is going to happen sooner than I thought it was going to. I really need to look at my health and see what's going on. I was on LinkedIn one day and saw a post and kind of followed it, and talked to this gal a little bit about what was going on. And she asked, it's when we get asked the hard questions about our lives that we tend to reflect and look at some things. And she said, I really want you to talk to Jerome. Well, Jerome is out of Texas. He has a company called Lifestyle Recalibration. It's designed for the people you and I talk to every day, the busy executive who, you know, doesn't have 2 hours a day to go work out. It's they have about a half hour if they can squeeze it in. And Jerome in his program I spent 3 hours on Zoom calls interviewing him. I wasn't going to jump. As you know, while I'm a early adopter, I'm a cautious early adopter. Uh, so I wanted that time, and I just felt what he was saying to me would work. So on May 14th, I basically said, Jerome, here it is, and paid him for a year in advance in training, and we started the journey. On that week, I went in, and anybody who's diabetic knows what an A1C is. My A1C was 7.9. I was lower than I had been in years, but I was still out of control. At that point, when I started with him, I weighed 337 pounds.
And a lot of people, when they receive a, a promotional um, lead on LinkedIn, click spam. But you went through all the interviews. You had a feeling about this person. And I'm guessing that whatever paying a year in advance upfront, I'm guessing that was not part of your budgeted allowance.
It was not. And actually, my wife, Barb, who who's a huge supporter of me, we sat and talked about it for a couple hours one night, because it was a big expense. And I said, I just don't know that this year is the year to do it. We got a lot of business expenses. And she said, I want you around. Your health is more important than money. And so I'm okay with it. I want you to go for it.
Have you changed the way you think about those types of investments since working with him?
Absolutely. I think investment in your health is your most important investment. Over If you're in the vacation rental business, it's over your tech stack, it's over everything. It's your health, because if you don't have it, what good is doing what you're doing?
Mm. It's almost also beneath everything.
Right.
It's like sits at the core of. And had you considered this kind of thing in the past?
I had, um, but I never had the self discipline to do it. And I will say this: when you lay out a big chunk of money, it creates a lot of self-discipline.
That's right. Got to get your money's worth.
You gotta get your, I mean, you've committed to it. And so then it kind of forces you into it. I have a weekly call with Jerome. Um, Tuesdays, 10 o'clock is off limits to anything else unless I'm on the road or at a conference. Um, I have a half hour to an hour call with him to go over my week.
All right. So, what does your relationship with Jerome start to look like? Is he got you exercising, eating differently? What starts happening?
So what starts happening is first he had me do a bunch of blood work so he could figure out where my metabolism was, what kind of body type I had, all of those things. And he started me on just walking a half hour a day, 6 days a week. His program is designed at around a half hour of working out. So I started working out, walking every day, rain or shine. Um, Matter of fact, yesterday it was 25 degrees out here, and I was out doing my half hour walk. He also provided me with meal planning. So we started out. My first 3 days were the 3 days of hell because I had to give up sugar, caffeine, and carbs in those first 3 days.
It's like all your favorite things.
All my favorite things. I used to drink a half a pot of coffee in the morning before I even left for work. Barb said I was green for those 3 days and just sent me home and said, "You're not even fun to be around." Um,
She's like, what have I done?
what have I done? Once I got my body detoxed, he started me on a lot of it. It leans towards the keto, so a lot of proteins and things like that, and vegetables. Um, and so I started to see a transformation right away. In that first kind of month and a half, all of a sudden I was down 10, 15 pounds. Uh,
Is that normal? Does that always happen?
what's funny is it doesn't always happen, but your body, when you have inflammation and things like I did from all the crap I ate,
Hmm.
um, your body starts losing that water weight, which goes fairly quickly. Uh, so yeah, so that transformation happened. Um, I started setting goals. My goal right now is that by May 1st, a year into this, I will be down 100 pounds, um, and off my diabetic medications. But my first goal was to be at 300 pounds by my daughter's wedding, July 10th.
Love that. And was that a Jerome idea to sort of stamp the goal alongside something that's already going to happen?
Yes, we worked together on some of those milestones, and that was the big one for me. And actually, what was funny is I went and bought clothes 3 weeks before the wedding, and then I had to go buy clothes again a week before the wedding. Um, I've
Did you
gone
get to return them?
No, because I had worn them for another event. Um,
You were changing that fast.
yes, I was changing that fast. I've gone from a 4X shirt to a 2X. I've gone from a size 50 pant to a size 42 since May.
Wow. And what was the reaction from people at the wedding? Were
They
they
were just amazed.
baffled?
They
Yeah.
were baffled. Family who hadn't seen me, didn't know I started this journey. Because my parents knew about it. I had a sister that knew about it. Obviously, work did, but family didn't. And so there was kind of this big shock when my my daughter, was down at that point 190 pounds, and I was down almost 50 pounds at that point. And so there was a big shock to see both of us. It was a pretty remarkable day.
I'm curious because I've observed a shift in your confidence, let's just say, because I think you really kind of came into your own as you started to see your instincts and your gifts that you have actually working with the business, and you started to grow it and realize that, wow, I'm not only capable of this, I'm actually really good at this. I'm world class. I'm capable of leading others in this. Um, did that confidence add to the decision to invest in Jerome?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I saw pictures of myself. I was pretty hard on myself this last spring. I was at a conference, which I am now president of the organization of the Northwest Vacation Rental Professionals. Um, I saw myself on stage and went, I can't be president of an organization and lead a team and a company and not take care? How can I expect those two things to be healthy if I'm not? And you're right. My Barb will tell you my confidence level since 2014 is grown huge, and um, I just felt I could do something about it at that point.
And now a word from our sponsors. Point Central provides smart property solutions for smart vacation property managers. They help streamline operations, protect the property, and enhance the guest experience using keyless access. Why? Because guests are tired after traveling, duh. And being able to go directly to that property with keyless access instead of stopping at a manager's office, this is no longer a luxury. This is a standard practice. Plus, everybody loves avoiding extra trips due to lost keys, not to mention the constant cost of rekeying. Point Central partners stay aware with an activity log of who enters and leaves the property, which helps keep track of cleaning and maintenance crews as well. You can also gain control of your utility bills with their smart thermostats. Schedule set points so guests won't be able to drastically raise or lower the temperatures, for instance. You can ensure the temperature stays consistent when the unit is vacant. Prevent costly maintenance projects caused by water leaks, mold, or HVAC issues with real-time alerts that allow you to be proactive. Visit pointcentral.com/VRMB to learn more. And Breezeway, whose property care and operations platform helps you coordinate, communicate, and verify the detailed work and deliver the best service experience to your guests. With tools for intelligent task scheduling, quality assurance, real-time work coordination, guest messaging, supplies management, owner reporting, and more, oh my! Breezeway helps thousands of short-term rental managers and hospitality operators increase your operational efficiency and eliminate hours of manual work. This allows you to boost your service revenue. It was created by the founding team of Flipkey, which was since acquired by TripAdvisor, and Breezeway is just elevating the experience at every property they touch. Visit breezeway.io/VRMB and get implementation fees waived. That's a $1,000 value right there. Okay, let's get back to the show. How do you advise people to find more confidence? Because it's not like a linear path. I think a lot of people listening are really good at what they do, but they still lack confidence to do much more.
I think you have to put yourself out. You, as you know, I'm not shy. I'll get out and talk to people, and I don't mind sharing my successes. And when I start sharing my successes, and I find people are still are interested in how I got there, it builds that confidence level to do something next. What's the next thing to do? Um, and sharing those things with other people, and having people come up and say, "Hey, I heard about. I've done a podcast with you before when we were in Memphis talking about the cookies, um, and my mom, and that podcast made a lot of difference in my life. And because I started having people call me and say, well, how do you look at getting new owners? What is Grassroots Ideas doing that? And which is what we've built our company on, is grassroots ideas and how to build.
Love that. And for those who are located in the Northwest, the Pacific Northwest, that organization is one of the most impressive, if not the most impressive, regional vacation rental management organizations, professionals organizations. They host an event each year. Where is the one this coming year?
We'll be in Reno in April.
And that is just like a no-brainer to follow in the footsteps of all the wisdom that you've heard up until now. We'll include a link to sign up and hang out with Brian and myself in the show notes. But I kind of want to walk us up to now where we opened this discussion. You've been building confidence. You've been practicing decision making when it comes to software and leadership. And you have this amazing wedding where this new phase of your life, your new physical appearance, and your feeling much better is starting to all change. And then I saw you, and we had this wonderful panel in Asheville at a most amazing um, LiveRez conference. And then the next thing I know, I hear that you were rushed off to the hospital. So I'm curious now if you can share what happened and what you make of it.
Well, I started suffering from internal bleeding. I had a situation where I had what they called bleeding diverticulitis with no warning, no infection, no pain, no nothing. I just started bleeding. And that is what happened when Barb found me. I had passed out from a loss of blood. They Barb called the front desk. The front desk called 911. Barb called Sally. It took 6 paramedics and 2 hotel security to kind of get me off of the situation I was in. They got me to come to a little bit in the hotel. I kind of remember that. And then if you remember the Grove Hotel, everything happens in the lobby. There were probably that night 200 to 300 people at least in the lobby. There's the bar, the couches, the fireplaces. It's a great spot to be. I guess I tried to convince the paramedics to let me put clothes on and walk myself out of the hotel because I didn't want people to see me in the situation I was in.
Oh, I thought it was because you thought you were going to join them.
Yeah, well, I would have done that, but um, I I was in the old part of the hotel, so they couldn't like lay me out. There was no freight elevator. There was nothing like that to move me out. So they had to take me through the lobby. Um, I was a mess. I looked like hell. Um, and from what I understand, and one of the things that was really came home to me is the word spread through the lobby fairly quickly that I was coming out, and that because there's an ambulance outside, and I guess it spread fairly quickly that it was me. And the family, I this tends to choke me up a little bit, and I get emotional about it. But the group from LiveRez and Inhabit, a group of them got together and formed a wall so people couldn't see me in all my wonderful situation being taken out to the ambulance. And that was kind of the first thing that happened that really changed some thoughts and how what this business is about. So they got me out to the ambulance, and Allison, who's the new operations manager at LiveRez and has been with Inhabit and is just a wonderful person, had Barb in her car and Sally behind the ambulance. And the paramedics got out of the ambulance and pulled Barb to the car, or pulled her to the ambulance, because I came to enough to talk to her. And basically, we didn't realize it till the next day, but they brought her to the ambulance to say hello, goodbye, because they weren't sure I was going to make it down the hill, Matt, to the hospital. That was a real eye opener. So they got me down to the hospital. I was a mess. I guess I came to a couple times, enough to talk a little bit, but not real coherent. They told me what had happened in the lobby. And I guess I said at the top of my lungs, you tell Allison we're never fucking leaving LiveRez.
That's what's on your mind?
That was what was on my mind. That, and the other funny thing was I was like, well shit, I didn't get to use my wooden coin to get my my stuff out of the swag booth to take back for my team.
The important stuff.
The important stuff. So 3 of them broke into the swag booth that night and filled 2 bags full of swag to bring to the hospital for me.
This is like what a professional vacational manager thinks about when he's been carted off to the emergency room.
Right. The next day, the emergency room doctor came in and said, do you know why you're here? And I said, well, I had a little bleeding issue last night. And he says, no, your body was in shock and shutting down. The first couple hours in the ER, they weren't real sure what was going to happen. I ended up having 5 units of blood transfused while I was there. But that entire time I was there, LiveRez and Inhabit did some things that went above and beyond things they did. I didn't think they had to do. They didn't. They had a conference with what? There were 350 of us there, and there's a couple things that happened in the ER. One, the ER doc said, "What are you here for?" I said, "Well, I'm here for a conference with 350 of my closest friends," and he just kind of laughed at me. And the next day he came in and he says, "So, how are you doing?" I says, "Well, first of all, I have to show you that I wasn't lying to you, that I was here with 350 of my close friends.
I wasn't
I wasn't
hallucinating.
hallucinating. My phone was full of text messages, emails. I got to watch you on stage because I wanted to see your keynote, and they made sure it was live streamed. So from the ICU, I got to see 90% of it until he showed up." And then LiveRez and Inhabit, back to them, what they did, what John and Robin and Donna and Allison and Alonda and Amber, all of them, they were all so wonderful. They made sure that Barb and Sally had a place to go because I was now going to be in the hospital for a while. We weren't sure how long. So they arranged for another vacation rental for them to move to from the Grove. They made sure there was some food in it for them. They got them back and forth between the Grove and the hospital to see me. They made their life, the part of the stay and the part of what they were going to do from a day-to-day thing, something they didn't have to worry about, so Barb could focus on me. And that just meant a lot to me.
Yeah, that it goes way beyond what anyone would expect from a software as a service, right?
Absolutely. It was family. It was a true partnership thing to do.
And it's really interesting. It comes at a time in our industry that big money seems to be stealing a lot of the headlines, and um, our industry is often, the hype leads to things that may not be quite as meaningful or powerful as relationships and the people that we work with and the teams that we work with and the companies that we work with and the guests that we solve. It really was, when you and I had that follow-up conversation, quite a poignant reminder that it does ultimately, if you peel back the layers, all come back to the people.
Absolutely. I don't care what anybody says. I'm not in the business of running homes. I'm not in the short-term rental business. I'm in the people business. I'm in a business of providing experiences and joy and happiness to families. So, or couples that are away on a honeymoon. Um, why can't we experience that in this industry amongst the software and the partners and things like that? I think I was in the hospital for 6 days. I was in ICU for 5. I had text messages and emails every day, phone calls. As you know, I belong to an advisory board. I was on one that's kind of gone away a little bit, but that advisory board still got messages and it still reached out to people I hadn't talked to in 6 months, 7 months, reached out to me to see how I was doing, to check on me. This industry is a family. Unfortunately, with some of the big corporate stuff coming in, it makes it seem like less of a family. But kind of fast forward, I get out of the hospital, out of Asheville. Mission Hospitals was phenomenal. He took great care of me. I got out of there. One of the funny things that happened is I wanted to book my flight. I'm like, I'm going to get out on Sunday so we can fly home on Monday. Barb's like, would you stop? Sally just said, let him do it. He doesn't have his wallet. He can't plan anything. Let him just do it. And so I sent some pretty crazy emails from the hospital to homeowners who were really understanding why they were mismatched. But I got out of the hospital and I had a goal. As you know, 2.5, 3 weeks after partner conference was Verma in Vegas. And I was invited to be on a panel there to talk about laundry systems. And my goal was I wanted to be there. And I actually didn't make a decision until the Wednesday or Thursday before we left. Well, I'd made the decision I was going to go, but I told Barb and Sally that Wednesday or Thursday the week before, if I'm not up to it, because I had trouble walking across the house because of all the blood loss. I said, I'm going to go. I made the decision. We went. That was one hell of a trek from from your room to the conference center, as you remember. And it made for really long days. But I knew what a big family I had when I got there. One of the reasons I wanted to go was to show that I was okay. And there were people that looked at me and said, we can't believe you're here, like you. And the hugs and the care I got when I was there was amazing. This is an amazing group and an amazing family.
Yeah, I think I actually caught you just beside that portrait photographer, and I saw you and Barb sitting there for a portrait. Whose booth was that?
That was Better Talent. That was Steve Trover's booth.
All right. Well, shout out to Steve Trovel. We will share that photo. I got behind the photographer and took a photo of the scene because it meant so much to me. So we'll post that photo in the show notes here as well. What has this whole health transformation changed about the way that you think about work?
Well, my 57th birthday was November 15th, and it caused me to take a lot of reflection. And after all of my tests and everything came back, work's important because I have 28 families that we're responsible for, that work for us. And so what that does is it makes me look at my health and say, I need to be healthy and I need to be here. I need to be here 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now to make sure that those families, they depend on me. My family depends on me. My son, Chris, who is also in the industry and works for another company, said to me that the morning he found out about this, he crawled in his bed in the fetal position and cried and trying to figure out how he could get to Asheville to help his dad. I never want him to feel that way again. So I have to take care of my health, and my health has to come before business. But as my father said, growing up, if you take care of people before profits, profits will come. Well, I'm that people. I need to take care of myself in order to take care of my team in order to be successful.
What a powerful idea to end on. My big takeaway from this conversation and having gotten to know Brian over the years, as well as the recent passing of Grant Wall, one of my idols in sports journalism, is that if you're a people person, like many of us in this industry are, there is likely a universe of people that you've impacted in little and big ways. And sometimes they share that in the form of a review or maybe just on the telephone. But more often than not, they don't say it all the time. Those kinds of thoughts are just kind of left until some kind of eulogy or moment to honor somebody beyond just the normal day-to-day. So Here is my appreciation officially for you, the person who listens to these podcasts, who uses them as motivation, who runs a meaningful business that impacts your community. This is my appreciation for people like Brian and for sharing what they know with others. There's something about generosity, there's something about courage, and there's something about obsession, like Brian, like Grant Wall, like many of the world's great craftspeople. There's something about these things that makes our industry very special. It makes it a family. If this idea resonates with you, consider joining Brian and me and over 1,000 of the world's most thoughtful vacation rental leaders in VRMB communities. Together, we are actively problem solving and building our own limited edition brands. You can join us at vrmb.com/join. Until next time.